Let me know when
Mhm.
you're good.
I'm good.
All right. In that case, hi, Ariel.
Hello.
Hi. If you wouldn't mind starting out, just telling us a little bit about yourself, your general expansive game audio history, I would say, to say the least, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Sure. So yeah, let me summarize. So I guess I started off um working in games in the kind of mid to late 90s. I had learned an obscure music composition software called tracking trackers. So it's
Mhm.
basically like if you wanted to Google it, Google Scream Tracker or Impulse Tracker, and you can learn a little bit about that. I was involved in this early internet. Well, I don't know if it's early internet. Anyways, uh, uh, kind of community, let's say, called the demo scene. And because I knew that obscure music software, I was invited to work on some projects with a company called Webfoot Games, which was you know indie casual games back in the 90s, and eventually I was able to kind of turn that into a on-site full-time gig working on a game called Dragon Ball Z: The Legacy of Goku for the Game Boy Advance. That after that, I went to school for audio, very similar to SCAD. Well, actually, not. It was called the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences in
Mhm.
Arizona. It's very much it's like an audio engineering school, but I decided I wanted to do that because I felt like, even though I'd been doing stuff, making music, making sounds on my own, I didn't really know the vocabulary and I felt a little out of my depth. So I wanted to learn that, so I did, and then went and worked at a company called Volition, which is my first AAA gig. And there I worked on, gosh, Saints Row 2, some Red Faction Guerrilla as a sound designer, and then I was the audio, I guess, project audio lead slash project audio director. The title changed, I think, halfway through or something like that, for Saints Row the Third. Helped a little bit, mostly consulting on Red Faction Armageddon, and then worked as and then was the studio audio director on Saints Row 4, and then worked a little bit on Agents of Mayhem in the very, very early days.
Mm.
And then I kind of took a kind of a parallel, like a sidestep into production as an audio and localization producer at BioWare, which brought me here to Austin. And worked there for a while on mostly Star Wars The Old Republic, but I also had my hands a little bit on some Dragon Age DLC and Mass Effect Andromeda. And then, excuse me, and then I went to a startup that was built by some ex Bioware folks called QC Games. And then after that, I started my own company called Team Audio, and we've worked on a bunch of stuff and are still working on a bunch of stuff and still going real strong. So that's pretty much it, as far as like the career bullet points.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're definitely going to jump into team audio. We've got loads of questions about that. I'm
Okay, cool.
we very rarely have somebody with your just amount of experience. And
Cool.
I'm
Right
always
on.
I'm always very fascinated by like Ryan and I are both like young children in this grand sound design landscape. So we've come up in this like world of polished DAWs and like loads of free plugins
Mm,
and like
mm.
an absurd amount of resources. And I'm always just curious, what did making like sound effects even look like back in 1996?
Oh man, yeah, the olden days.
I'm familiar
Uh,
with trackers. Like I understand
oh yeah,
that. Oh yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
cool, very cool.
They're coming. They're coming back. Actually, they're kind of hip right now.
I know. Well, they should be because they're really cool.
Yeah.
So so back then, oh my gosh, when I like the first game I did sound for was a game called 3D Maze Man, and it was essentially a Pac-Man clone, but it was in the very very early days of 3D graphics. And so for that one, I recorded all the sounds myself, but I mean I was 16, so I mean
Hmm.
I didn't know what the heck I was doing. All the sounds for that were recorded. My microphone was a headphones. which works, you know. So if you like plug
Yeah.
your if you plug your headphones into the input and yell into your headphones, I mean, it'll record that. So because it's still a transducer. So, anyways, that's what it looked like for me. And I would do a lot of I was using Cool Edit way
Okay.
back in the day, and you know, I would do whatever I could. I just it's very similar technique wise, I think, to people who are just starting out. It's like you take whatever tool you got in front of you, that's the best one, and you experiment and you make a bunch of stuff, and you feel kind of, well, I felt kind of like a you know, an idiot basically. I was like, I don't know what I'm really doing here, but I just kind of found my way through it. And you know, similar process of I'd send sounds over to the crew, and they would listen to them, and you know, sometimes they'd be like, we can't even tell really what this is, so can you redo that one, you know, or whatever. So, and then I also use trackers actually for sound design in those early days, because trackers, you know, you just take a wave file. It's like a little miniature sampler for
Mhm.
it's software sampler basically. And so I'd like plop a wave file in there and do weird vibrato and pitch bends and whatever, and then record, you know, export that out. It was a really ramshackle way of doing it, but it got the job done. And you know, by the time I went to Volition, I was working in Sony Vegas and SoundForge, and you know, by the time when at Volition they had like a sound library, you know,
Mhm.
proper sound library, like they had purchased many libraries, and so that was kind of really eye-opening for me, because I was like, oh my gosh, there's like all these great recordings here that I can use. And then it and so you know, I would is turned into pretty much what it is today for me, which is like, you know, taking lots of library sounds, putting in some of my own elements, whether it's synthesis or
Mhm.
recordings, and layering and manipulating and having fun. So, but you know, back in the day, it was one of the biggest things, like let's say in the 90s, or working on handheld, like mobile, is it's kind of like the analog to mobile. I mean, I guess it's mobile, called it handheld. Anyways, Game Boy Advance is that you had these really tiny file size limitations.
Mhm.
So Legacy of Goku, the you know, they brought me on because I knew tracking software, because what you can do is you can just basically load up, you know, let's say 100K of sounds, and make a bunch of songs, because the song data is very small.
Mhm. Mhm.
And in the Legacy of Goku, I mean, they had implemented a tracker back end, which was actually kind of what got it, part of what made it awesome at the time, was because everyone else was using like an onboard chip, and so it sounded very, you know, Game Boy-y. You
Mhm.
know, it is a very very low channel count, very simple waveform kind of thing. But we came in with like samples, and so
Mhm.
people are like, oh my gosh, you can hear like it's, you know, it's actual kind of instruments, you know, sampled instruments. But nowadays it's like we tend to care less and less about like file size, and more about, you know, expression. And you know, you can't be going crazy and making bad decisions about being unoptimized. But
Mhm.
generally speaking, it's like the freedom is so much greater. I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
Totally, yeah. Do you think anything has sort of lost as, you know, everything is now, or proverbially, like everything is now available to us? Do you think that, especially with what you're seeing in newer sound designers or just the industry where it's at right now, do you think there's something kind of missing in the lack of like duct tape and kind of stick to itiveness, or do you think it's like
Maybe
awesome?
the stories of doing it that way. I think it's great. I think the more accessible and the lower the barrier to entry and the more tools we have is kind of the better. I do
Hmm.
think that people, this is a bit of a um, well, you know, it's something that I will harp on basically, is that, you know, people kind of fetishize technology, and it's
Mm.
very easy to let me put it this way. When I was growing up, uh, you know, I knew this guy who had all this great gear, and he never used it. You know, so he's just had all this amazing audio gear. I'd go over to his house and I'd be like, "Oh my god, you know, like look at it's like kid in a candy store kind of thing." But he never used it, and so he would just buy these things, and then they would just sit there, and then, you know, I guess, you know, I go over there and use them and have fun. But like it's you got to be careful, I guess. Everyone's different, but for me, I have to be careful, because the more tools I have, At some point, you just sit there looking at it blankly, like, I don't. I mean, I've got 17 distortions, so which one do
Hmm.
I use?
Mhm.
And it's easy to kind of go down that slope. So in a way, those limitations that we had back then could be helpful, I guess, because you kind of are you're looking at this palette and it's very limited, and it's like, what can you do with that? But at the end of the day, I think I think it's good. I think it's good to have more options, more tools available. Doesn't necessarily mean that you want to just get them all. So
Hmm.
I don't necessarily think anything is lost. In fact, I think the longer we go on, the more expressive we can be, and the better stories we can tell. And so I think anything that kind of lends to that goal. If you ask yourself, like, why do we even make games? It's really, I mean, you start there. You say, like, what are we doing here? Why are we making this? And what is it supposed to be telling people? And what are we saying with it? And then your tools can usually kind of fall out of that. And anything that distracts from that is risky. But generally speaking, I love seeing I love seeing greater accessibility, free tools. I think it's beautiful. I came
Hmm.
up very much in the free music, free. That's kind of one of the central things about demo scene where I got my start. Really was free stuff. It's like the it didn't software. The tracker was free. That's why I was able to use it. And I think that's beautiful. And in fact, a lot of the times I think people underestimate free stuff.
Mhm.
I have a large amount of free plugins that I mean are I would say are equally valuable to any of the most expensive plugins I have. I still use them. Um, and I think that's great. So yeah, I don't think that that broadening has necessarily detracted from anything. Although, you know, you'll see in 20 years you'll have the same war stories about how limited you were.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
when we're all jacked into the net or whatever it is.
Hmm. Yeah, Neuralink, exactly.
Well, that's awesome. We always do our best to not harp too much on gear in these talks because it's one, it's a rabbit hole that you could talk about forever, and two, it's, as you said, not necessarily productive. But we're all struggling college students, or I guess I'm a former college student. Um, is there any things you recommend just for people to pick up? Something you're using a lot right now that you really love, or?
Hmm. So I use Reaper, and I would highly recommend it to everyone.
Woo!
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I've kind of surfed on the waves of anti-sentiment for other DAWs or whatever, but I feel like I'm kind of past that at this point. It's like what use whatever is good.
Mhm.
But Reaper is fantastic because it is free to get going. I would always encourage people to buy it because it's awesome and the people are great. But you can get in there and start using some really state of the art audio software for free. And then if you use it personally for non commercial stuff, it's $70 or something. It's crazy cheap. So I really recommend Reaper. Highly customizable, and the plugins that come with it are really actually really good. You have to kind of learn them just like anything else, but they're good. Especially Refer, which is their FFT based plugin. I'm probably showing that I'm dumb, but I don't know how to describe it, but it's amazing for noise reduction,
Hmm.
and it's a really fancy EQ. But anyways, that as far as like other stuff, I just go to KVR. I go to KVR and I search for free plugins, and
Mhm.
that's how I find free stuff. And as far as cheap stuff is concerned, I mean, a sound effect. Go get some cheap libraries. One bit of advice I would give, which by the way, that I mean, the fact that a sound effect exists, there's other ones too, but I love a sound effect because it's all these cool boutique sound libraries, and many of them are cheap, and
Mhm.
they're always the sales. And so it's like that wasn't around when I was coming up. Libraries were expensive, especially if you're broke. And so what's great about a sound effect is you first you get your project. This is the thing I think is a mistake some people make. First you get the project, then you go to a sound effect and you buy the libraries that are going to help you for the thing you need to make. Or you're making a demo and you can go drop, you know, even $60 probably and get a start, and get some stuff to work with. And so I would highly recommend that. I think sometimes there's a stigma around libraries, but there absolutely shouldn't be. It's the best. And I would say, it's not to say that I would say don't record stuff, because you absolutely should. In fact, I did today a little bit with my son. But as far as like getting yourself going and moving, use someone else's really high quality stuff. Why not? That's what it's there for. Pick it up, manipulate the heck out of it, layer it, and if you're working on a demo, go spend a few bucks. You don't have to go crazy. Just buy that's what's great about a sound effect, is like there's like a library for everything. So it's like, I need a vacuum. Okay, vacuum. Okay, there's a bunch of vacuums. Or whatever. And so it's cool, and then you slowly kind of build up your library. Another inexpensive over the short term solution or software that I would recommend is Soundly. Not everyone necessarily knows about that, but you need a good sound effects database, and Soundly allows you to do it on a monthly payment plan. I think it's after 3 or so years, if you prefer SoundMiner, it would have actually been cheaper.
Yeah.
So you got to do that math.
Well,
But
and not to interject, but for any of the students watching this, there is a student plan for Soundly as well, which cuts it in half. So that's 6 years to
wow, that's
SoundMiner.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And they actually have a really good, I think, a really good pro library that comes along with that. So if you pay the monthly rate, you get access to basically a big old sound library, which is awesome. Very helpful.
It's really good content. It's
Yeah,
and they're
there's a lot of
updating it
great
all the
stuff
time.
there, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and plus it searches free sound. You gotta be a little careful there, but yeah. The other
Yeah.
thing too, I would say, as far as plugins are concerned, my kind of go-to plugins. There's a handful of Waves plugins I use all the time. I use the L2 all the time. I use the actually, I love FabFilter stuff. I use FabFilter Pro Q3 all the time. Great EQ, I think. And then basically Native Instruments Complete, which is very expensive. But if you're gonna save up and buy a really strong set of tools, Native Instruments Complete. I mean, it's very expensive though. It's like $1,000 or something. I wish it would come down. Actually, I really wish that they would do something about that to make it more accessible. But boy, the tools there are incredible. I can't tell you how much I use Transient Master. It's funny. It's just a knob. It's like it's like 2 knobs or something. But I use it a lot because it's like, why isn't this transient really punchy? Okay, let me just make it punchy with this knob. It's great. But as far as tools are concerned, I'm very much not a purist. I use whatever is in arm's reach, and I have very little judgment based on what's hip or whatever. I get a lot of free stuff. I go to KVR pretty frequently and get the latest, coolest free tools because I love them. And you got to be careful not to value something based on how much it costs, especially in this industry, because audio stuff, it's whatever gets the job done. So I don't know if that's helpful. I hope it is.
Absolutely, yeah. So jumping over to Team Audio, I was wondering if you could kind of give us some insight into your thought process as to why you formed Team Audio, why give yourself the extra headache, or were you giving yourself less of a headache? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the reason I started Team Audio, so I was working in-house in AAA for many years, and I had been a hiring manager essentially in AAA game audio for a while, a long time, and I saw a pattern when um, when people would apply to positions. Many we would get every time we would get many freelancers, and I would always ask them why give up the freelance lifestyle, because the grass being greener and whatnot. I would always imagine that like that would be great, to kind of work on your own terms and just work on lots of projects and stuff. And I saw patterns in their responses, which was things like they didn't want they didn't like the hustle. There's this whole side of it, which is business development. So you're trying to do a job, but you also need to line up the next job, that kind of thing, and sales essentially. And then they wanted to feel like they were part of a team. They felt like the team was lacking because they were working kind of as individuals and didn't feel like they had a cohort, to kind of be with a team, community. And then another one would be kind of along those lines. didn't feel like there was opportunity for mentorship as an individual freelancer. It was hard to find a mentor who would kind of shepherd them on their path, because in it's going to vary based on what your freelance gig is. Sometimes you can find a mentor, but it's a little trickier because you're kind of considered external, and that was also another pattern. And so I thought, for me personally, I was thinking, I could continue along this path, continue being an audio director in AAA games in-house, or maybe audio director slash producer, or maybe producer or something like that. And well, if I'm going to be honest, which I will be, is that the thing about working at a company, any company, is that you're working for someone. First of all, you're always working for someone. We work for people too, but it's a little different. But so you're always working for someone. You're always working with a group of people that you really don't have much control over who is benefiting from the hard work you're doing. So if I work for a really great company, let's uh, pick Google, right? It's like, so I'm working at Google, and who are the people that are benefiting from my hard work? At the end of the day, the people that are most benefiting are certainly not. You probably don't even see them. You know what I mean? So they're off in the stratosphere, executives and whatnot. Not to badmouth executives, because I'm not, but it's like you kind of I another piece personally was is that I wanted a choice over who was benefiting from my work, because I am the type of person that whatever the task is, I get into this with my kids a lot, is like whatever it is in front of me, I'm either going to pour my heart into that thing or I'm not going to do it. That's just, it's kind of binary that way. I'm like, if I'm doing the thing, I'm doing it, and I'm going to, I'm going to care about it. I have to, because if I stop caring, then I get depressed because I'm like disengaged, and what kind of it just doesn't work for me. Like, I can't punch a clock. That's not who I am. And that's fine if that is who other people are. It's totally, but that's just not who I am. So I was like, if I'm going to pour my heart into something, I really want to have a greater choice in who benefits from that. Because at the end of the day, it's time, and time is limited. It's finite, at least today. So anyway, um, so I decided, I'm ready to try an experiment here. I was not in the right place financially. It was a terribly risky and dumb decision, to be honest, timing wise. I just had my third kid. I had just had a tax thing where, like, my CPA had not reported all my income, and so I had to pay a bunch of taxes. So my savings was basically wiped out. But I was like, screw it. I did believe in myself, so I had that, and I have a strong family believing in me, and that sort of thing. So, like, I felt supported. I was like, all right, I'm just going to do it. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to, and plus I had a few people I've been talking to, most especially Chris Rickwood, who is a composer, who's also been to SCAD a lot. He's in Atlanta, and he's an amazing person who. I was talking to him, and he also encouraged me and said, if you want to make this leap, I can help you with your first clients, which was the perfect scenario, because basically he's like, quit your job. I got some work you can start on right away. And then we build that bridge to starting this company. And he's been with us from the very beginning. He's fantastic, an amazing composer too, just mind blowing. And we set out to kind of solve this problem of these patterns we saw, which is that how can we make a company where we have a bunch of individual freelancers that that you know we help to solve the business development side of things. So we help to get the clients, and we also, I've been around for a while, so I know what the work is worth. And so a lot of people out there vastly undercharge, especially individual freelancers. They're vastly undercharging, and so it's like, well, I know how to help with that. Plus, you're getting kind of a group of people. You get me too. So even if you're just an associate sound designer, let's say, just kind of starting out as a freelancer, but being able to say, I'm with this cadre of experienced veterans that are going to help make sure that I do a good job, that brings value, allows them to charge more, let's say. And then, make it feel like a team, and provide mentorship, and really be very, very particular about who we bring in. one thing about team audio that is worked out, it's an experiment. It is still an experiment, and it may not work. We've been around for a couple and a half years, something like that, almost going on 3 years. But it's still very much an experiment. And one of the core principles is basically we hire exclusively based on fit. You got to fit. That's chemistry is really what we refer to it as, and competence has to be there. Obviously, we're not going to bring in someone that's incompetent, right? But if the competence is there and the chemistry is there, then we bring them in, and we have a very kind of a specific way of doing that. But when you come in, then the idea is like, all right, well, a priority is a sense of team, and a priority is making sure that we have the ability, like the mechanisms in place to provide mentorship, and it's worked. It's worked so far. It's been fantastic. And really, what it is it's very much me and a handful of other veterans who are putting our reputations on the line, and basically pulling on our existing relationships to form great new relationships with clients. So we haven't done and don't really do any advertising or anything like that. It's all purely relationship driven, word of mouth, that kind of thing, and it's been going great. So that's why and what kind of in one spiel. It's very exciting, and I'm really proud of my crew. Couldn't imagine a better group of people. So grateful. It's really been life changing for me. So I'm glad I did it, even though every day can be a little like, oh man, it's a little scary, for sure. Also kind of being the person who is accountable to all those people and responsible for them. It can be daunting, but it's such a good team, and so far all those things. Like I'll say that it's had its ups and downs, certainly in terms of at least of the work, but throughout all of it, everyone has, we query our team about how they're doing and ask them, questions about their morale and things like that. And so far, that part is very strong. So, and I feel like the experiment is, can we pull together people that we really, really care about, the team that really kind of loves each other and loves working with each other, and if we prioritize that above even the projects and above the clients, and make sure that above everything else is really a sense of like we are a team that are working towards the same goal and we care about each other, will the rest fall into place? And so far the answer is yes. So it's great.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's we've had the chance over the last year or so to talk to a couple people who I think operate in a similar position. We talked to Gord with Shell in a Pit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't got him on the show yet, but Kevin Regami is kind of a friend of the club.
Love Kevin.
Yeah, and it's been really cool to see what has driven you all to maybe not the same place, but sort of a similar, I guess, business model,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the differences between all of those. It's been really insightful just to see. So that's really cool.
Right
Thank you
on.
so much for
Cool.
the insight. Getting
Yeah,
into
sure.
the getting into the nitty gritty a little bit, would you mind telling us what I guess, pre-COVID work day looks like for you guys compared
It
to
looks
maybe,
almost exactly the same.
yeah.
So this is the thing about Team Audios, is that we are a remote collective of talent, basically. So we all, I mean, we have some little kind of hot spots geographically. Um, like there's a few of us here in Austin. There's a few people in Atlanta. But generally speaking, I mean, we're kind of spread all out, and that's been the work day has largely looked very similar. So basically, a work day for, I can't speak for everyone else, but a work day for me is, wake up, log in. The thing is that right now I'm assigned to a project, which
Mhm.
I'm essentially audio directing a game. So there is that is 99% of my time, which is a whole other thing we could talk about. But like, trying to run a business while also working on a project is very hard. But so really for me, it's pretty much 9 to 5 is working, or more is working on my project, and that's kind of the same for everyone else. We all just kind of work on our projects, and we try really hard to integrate deeply with our teams. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way because that's not what they want. But our ideal is that, you know, we're on their Slack, we're on their VPN, we're building the game, and we're just working in the editors, and we're just like a regular old teammate, but maybe not on site is the thing.
Mhm.
We've done some on site stuff too, but really it's just it's do the thing, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so it's very much just remote game audio development, which is which runs the gamut. You know, it's a it could be a mixture of communication and creative and technical. That's really what it is. And from a kind of a going, I guess maybe a step above that, we have a kind of a leadership crew. Excuse me. There's four of us in that, and then we have a kind of a group of people whose work it comes exclusively from Team Audio, which is I think maybe 10 people now. And we you know, we make sure to keep the internal communication going strong. So we do meetings, and you know, of just Team Audio, but a lot of the times those are those are like outside business hours basically, because everyone's working on stuff. But interestingly, everyone's always excited about them because we like to we like to hang out, you know.
Mhm.
So when we, you know, it might be on a weekend, it might be in the evening, but I'll hop on calls with people one on one or in small groups, and we just talk about things. And the other thing too is it's we are always looking for new and interesting ideas from the team, from our crew, which is part of that team feeling. So, you know, we'll try out things. So it might be like, well, there's a handful of people that all seem to be really interested in making a sound library. So how do we organize? Who wants to take point on that? How do we organize that? How do we do it? Let's do a small experiment to see if it works. Usually, Team Audio can pay at least some kind of gestural sum, so that it's not completely speculative work. And so we always have this kind of like this little bubbling cauldron of things to do that are kind of project agnostic, let's say.
Mhm.
So as far as the standard workday, it's all over the place, really. It's kind of like
Mhm.
what's the task at hand. So it's hard to
Yeah.
describe. I don't know if that's a. I don't mean to cop out that answer, but it's kind of you know, whatever is needed at the time, and it is a mixture of building relationships and maintaining them. And that makes it sound kind of clinical, but you know, it's like being friends with people and also working with our clients and making sure we're talking a lot, and then doing cool creative stuff, and then doing the cool technical stuff. It's just, you know, it
Yeah.
doesn't really look any different before or after COVID because we're all remote. So we all work from home.
Okay. Yeah. So you talked to all these freelancers when you were working AAA, and they were upset by the hustle. So you're like, I want some of that. Give me as much of
Yeah.
that as
So,
possible.
well, you know, I will say, like, I mean, there's no shortage of stories or anecdotes about how difficult it is to run a business, but
Hmm.
it's also extremely rewarding for me. And this is gonna maybe sappy or whatever, but like when I look at, you know, I'll be I like I said, I work on a project, and so you know, for the majority of the day, I'm not even on my personal audio computer. I'm on the dev machine, right? And so
Hmm.
I pop out of that at the end of the day or at night, and I just skim what's been going on the Team Audio Slack, and it fills my heart with joy because everyone's talking, they're engaged in their projects, they're engaged outside the projects, they have ideas, they're sharing work, they're talking about personal stuff. It's just really good. So even though it's always a sacrifice to try to start a business because there's just so many moving parts.
Hmm.
Um, I don't regret a thing. I really don't. I feel like it's the best decision professionally that I've ever made. I would encourage other people to do it. I would love if anyone who happens to watch this would like to talk about what it's like. And I get a lot of this sounds like a humble brag. I get a lot of people that want to talk, you know, about they're either starting out or they are thinking about freelancing or whatever it is. A lot of the questions I get are like, you know, a lot of dry questions actually. It's like, you know, what does this mean for my taxes, and how do I do health insurance, and what kind of paperwork is required? And I'll help with that however I can, you know. So anyone that sees this and has some questions, any questions, always happy to answer it. So yeah, I love it.
No, it's awesome. That's really great to see. Jumping back to like, I feel like it's the hot topic we have to touch on for the last couple months.
do it.
Is everybody freaking out about how COVID is going to change the industry forever? Do you think that's kind of blown out of proportion? Do you think that's what do you think that's going to look like in whenever this thing's done?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So okay, back starting Team Audio,
Hmm.
back 3 years ago. Um, another factor was I believed that this change was already kind of happening. Like just in my experience as an in-house audio director, I had seen it's kind of like this, there's all these dots that you start to connect over time. And looking at how the industry has changed. I mean, I guess that's one of the benefits of being around for a little while. There's certainly people that have been around longer than me, but being around it and kind of observing it over gosh, I guess 20 plus years or whatever, you start to see these changes happening.
Hmm.
I very distinctly remember there was a time there where I was kind of observing the AAA and indie changes. So at some point you get you're watching AAA and it's going through its own sort of metamorphosis of like, the budgets just keep getting bigger, and then we're moving to live services, and then the DLC is changing, battle pass, and then you see, you watch that whole thing and you're going like, this is all changing. And then you watch how people peel off of AAA and start their own things and what happens there. And then the indie thing happened where it's like, oh, suddenly, just I think really really what it was there was a lot of incredibly good indie games started really coming out. And it was probably because of the tools and the accessibility stuff we were kind of talking about earlier. Um, and then you see these indie companies blow up and get, enormous influxes of money, and how that changes things, because then you see indie companies who are still making games that look indie, but they have a lot of money now. Or this I've heard it referred to as kind of triple I, which is like,
Hmm.
publisher funded indie games, or however you want to phrase it, however you want to frame it. There's all this change happening, and one thing that I was talking about with Chris actually was, what I think is gonna happen is that you're gonna find more, and along with that, sorry, one more data point is that it's just over time it just becomes easier and easier to work remotely. Like as an in-house person, I was seeing this pattern of people who were in-house, like like key roles were being allowed to work remotely. Like, so you'd have this, let's say, a principal programmer, just a super talented and integral person, would negotiate the ability to work remotely. And I was seeing this happen, and then it was fine. They were still able to do their job. In fact, in some ways it might have even been better, because they were suddenly outside certain in-house behaviors that would claim a lot of their time, and make them less effective. So I saw that happening. I was like, what I think is going to happen is that um, more studios are going to turn into creative brain trusts. Like you might have a dozen people who are the vision holders for their disciplines, let's say, and they're just going to outsource the rest. They're going to outsource the development of the game, and there are models for that all over the place, and it's happening. And so I think you got to take that into account when thinking about COVID or anything kind of like this, where it's like, well, the some of the clients, many of the client, all the clients right now that we work with, they're all working remote. There's not a single client we have is going into a brick and mortar all sitting together, because I mean, that's not probably very smart for them, or at least there's enough people within each team to say this is too risky, I don't want to do it, and it would be problematic. So and it's working. It's working. I mean, to varying degrees of success, but I do think that what we're looking at is a world where, by force, it has been forced. Basically, upper management and executives and leadership has been forced to realize that it can work.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I think many people would have been very cautious, very concerned about doing something like that before. But now it's like, well, what are you going to say? It didn't work when we did that, and yet we made and shipped games. Look at all these games that are coming out. I mean, many of them are being wrapped up remotely or done
Mhm.
remotely from start, and for that matter. So I think that the biggest change that's going to come out of this is people realizing that this can be done. And I feel like our timing was good for Team Audio because we had a little bit, just enough of a leg up on how to coordinate logistically this arrangement, and how to make this how to handle an arrangement like this and keep things feeling positive and healthy. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that, which is great. It's a good
Mm-hmm.
place to be, I think. Um, but I think it's going to become the norm. I think that what you're going to see is, of course, there's reasons for people to want to work together in face to face, and I think that people are I mean, we're all kind of ready for that to happen, obviously, but I think that after the dust settles, it's going to be harder for employers to say you have to have your ass in a seat here physically at this location.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually, I think that's a good thing, because I think the best way, because you got to ask yourself why. Why do you have to be physically present? Well, is it because someone needs to see that you're working? Well, I would counter with the way to judge that the work is getting done at a high quality is that the work is getting done at a high quality. And you just judge the results, and that's a beautiful thing because it allows people to reclaim their time, or give them a little bit of freedom, and be a little more oriented towards outcomes, which I think is a positive thing. So we'll see how that goes, but that's kind of what I'm seeing from my vantage point anyway.
Sure, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just as students, as people kind of entering the industry, one of the things we're all kind of wondering is how does this change getting that first job, right? What is that? How does that change the hiring process? And as somebody with a lot of experience in that regard, I'd love any insight you have there too.
Well, boy, it's hard. It's funny, on our Team Audio Slack for the longest time, I've had my little icon next to my name has been a crystal ball because I love to do this sort of thing. I love to try to predict, and I look at patterns and think about what might happen. Um, I think that in many ways it doesn't change anything, to be honest,
Mhm,
because as someone just starting out, it doesn't you're already simulating that because you are working at home, putting together your demo reel, preparing, practicing, that sort of thing. So in that case, that all is basically the same. I guess one downside is that you're less likely to have if you live in a place that has these, you're less likely to go to a face-to-face meetup.
mhm,
So that kind of sucks. So and I love that. I've been to several GDCs, and I occasionally go to other audio meetups or game dev meetups and whatever. So that's kind of harder. But what has taken the place is kind of an explosion of discords and slacks and other little ways to communicate with the community. So I think that as far as like what a aspiring sound designer, let's say, is heading into, uh, for preparing for your first job, mechanically looks very similar to what it has always looked like,
mhm,
which is, at the end of the day, I mean, it's practice. It's just practicing every spare chance you can without burning yourself out and without, ruining the balance of being a human being. Or whatever you're comfortable with, I guess. So I think that still kind of looks very similar. The thing that will look different is, actually, I think it probably right now probably plays to people's benefit. I mean, certainly if you're an introvert, it does, I think, which is like, you're looking more likely at working from home.
mhm,
And that the thing there is that it actually opens up a lot of one of the hardest challenges of getting a job in this industry is location, which has always been a problem. It's always kind of driven me crazy. I think it sucks. Basically sucks. It's like you might have an incredible talent that doesn't have money and doesn't like, because you don't necessarily get flown somewhere and moved out
mhm,
at a starting position. You probably get some help if it's a big company and they can afford to help you, but it's not like if you're going to be hired as an associate sound designer in LA, let's say, and you got to move from, I don't know, Minnesota. What do? You know, it sucks because you might have this incredible talent out there. So in a way, I think that's good because now it's kind of like, well, you're where you are doesn't matter as much, at least to start. And
Mhm.
then if you can get your foot in the door somewhere, then maybe when everyone comes back to the office, maybe you'll have shown that it's important to move you out if that's the thing, if that's the case. But also, I mean, I've already seen this too, is like, you know, the hotbeds of game development are expensive places to live, you
Mhm.
know, and it's that also sucks. So it's like, well, maybe now we can have talented people, competent people, people who are already working really hard to develop their skills as associate level sound designers, as early, you know, as students, or just people who are maybe making a career change or whatever. Maybe now they have an opportunity that they wouldn't have had before because the company is not requiring them to move to LA and they can't afford it. This is it's in a way, I maybe I am an optimist, and so like I think I see silver linings more than I see the dark stormy clouds. But you know, game development, at least right now, has still been going very strong. And I think, you know, the only risk really that we have is that so many people are out of work for so long that they can't afford to buy games anymore. For better or worse, I think that's still a little ways off. I hope, you know, it'll eventually affect every industry. And at that point, what the heck? I don't even know. So, but as far as what the change is, I don't really think there's a change as far as like if there's a student right now watching this that is getting ready to go join the job force, or is uh they're they're about to graduate, let's say.
Mhm.
It's the same plan, which is practice like crazy, communicate to as many people as you possibly can, build as many genuine friendships as you possibly can, work on projects, whatever you can get your hands on, mods, you know, indie games, game jams, whatever it is, like work as much as you possibly can. I mean, without, you know, sacrificing. You don't want to look back one day and be like, I worked every second of my life. Was it worth it? You know, probably not. So you got to balance it with like being a human, but that also kind of looks the same in my mind.
Sure.
I could be
Yeah.
wrong. I'm not there. I'm not at that place. So if someone's watching this and going like, "What an a-hole," because he's being very you know, he's missing the point here, I apologize. So my view is different into that. So if that's not quite right, matching up with what your experience is, whoever's watching this, I apologize about that. And hit me up. I'd be curious to know what your experience has been like because I want to be educated on it. But I still do think that mechanically it's the same sort of. It's essentially the same process.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, kind of keeping on the recruitment train for just a little bit, you're obviously somebody who gets a whole lot of demo reels thrown your way, probably pretty
Yeah.
often. And I was just wondering, what
Hmm.
are some of the things you're looking for?
Yeah.
I guess particularly at the associate level or junior level or whatever you want to call it, but just overall.
Yeah. Um, so that's a great question. That's like the one that everyone wants to know is like, are people kind of looking for? And I think for me, so first of all, I would say that everyone's different. So just, you know, take this as one person's view into it. And I'm not everyone and everyone's not me. So, but this is what I look for is basically potential. That's it. At the end of the day, I'm looking for potential. I want to see um, that someone is so really it's usually about kind of sticking out. Here's what it looks like for team audio, right? Is that we'll get a project and we will need to staff that project. So we look at the project and we say we need someone who will be great at X, and it's usually somewhat specific. You know, it's like, is this a what's the type of game? You know, so it's like, is this a puzzle game? Well, we need someone who's going to be really good at like puzzle sounds, you know, or whatever, something that fits that thing. And you're right. I get, you know, I and other people in the crew get a large amount of demos to check out and people wanting to chat and stuff like that. And we're always talking to people. So this is something that we've actually kind of been talking about. Hold on, I'm going to let my dog in the door. She's driving me crazy. This is the best part of the video.
Of course, yeah.
Um,
Hey.
okay. So yeah, this is squishy. She's gonna be annoying me through this. No, she's good. She's good. She's good. So let me tell you what I do, and then, you know, I don't know if it'll answer the question. It might be a little oblique, but I'll tell you what I do, which is I I get I get messages
Mhm.
from people, and they will, because I also did this thing called the audio mentoring project, which also kind of uh, um, kind of put my name out there as someone who people feel maybe a little safer getting in touch with, which is great because I want people to feel that way. So I'll get messages from people from one way or the other, and I will talk to them. Like 90% of the time, they'll it's someone reaching out because through a referral, like someone said to get in touch, or they found something I wrote, or they were just, I don't know. There's so many ways to find me on the internet. Again, that's I'm not trying to be all like that, and that's cool. It's just is that I've got my name is out there on the internet, and people find me somehow, and so they write me, and it's actually kind of great. A lot of these messages are really, really long. Um, there'll be two-page messages that are very sometimes it seems like someone's just been like agonizing over it, getting in touch, thinking about what they're going to write and pouring their heart out sometimes, which for anyone watching, like I don't know that that's safe for everyone. It's certainly safe for me. Like I'll get the message and I find it endearing when people are like, yeah, they pour their hearts out, which is great. I'm like, I'm a stranger, but it's cool. And I will talk to them, and I'm very slow to respond. This is another thing is like I'm basically what we refer to as interrupt driven. So basically like I'm working at all time, and I'm I have 300% of work. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I have no time. And so basically I'm driven by the things that interrupt me that are the most important. And so sometimes that's my family. They take, they trump everything. They come in, it's like, got to go do that, and then I'm back at work, and then something happens here, and then something happens at work, and then something, and so I'm always trying to do this. So I, I I try to batch up my replies to people that are just asking for, they have a question or they want to talk or they want me to look at something or whatever. So I'm very slow to reply. So usually what happens is someone writes me, if it catches me, it happens to be at the right time, I shoot a response back, and it's probably going to be like, they're going to write me this much, and I'm going to write back like 2 sentences, and I'm going to point them to an article I wrote and say, like, think of a few questions that you think if you asked me, that if I answered them it would be actually beneficial and practical for you. Boom. And I kick it off, and then that's a month later usually, and then if they're still interested, they'll write me back, and then I'll write them back, and then eventually we might hop on a phone call, and I'm just talking. I'm in this constant state of talking to a bunch of people who are interested in game dev, who might have been told to get in touch with me or whatever, and I'm just talking, 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 and I'm seeing. It's the truth of it is it's all this big giant interview. It's like this big long, super long term interview that's happening. And I hope that now that I've said that, maybe someone's going to see this and be like, "Oh God," but you shouldn't feel that way. But it's just be yourself or whatever. But basically, I'm just talking to people all the time, and then many of them are sending me things to check out. I'll check them out. Sometimes I'll give a few notes of feedback if I can, or be like, have you thought about this, or check out this other demo, or whatever. And I'm trying to help however I can. But I'm trying to help without expectation, right? I'm just trying to help however I can.
Mhm.
But over time, over these long periods of time of discussion, sometimes a couple months to a year or years or whatever, I'm just talking to people. What will happen is I'll start to know them. One of the trickiest things about hiring, maybe the hardest thing about hiring, is that you never really know who you're getting. I can't tell you how many times someone aces an interview, aces a test, aces the demo, aces it, and then you start working with them, and then you're like, this is not good. Like this is not what I expected, right? You only really know who you got after working with them for like a year. That's just the fact. That's just how it goes, because people, they put their face, they put their best version forward, and then after you worked with them for a while, you start to understand them a little better, and then you know them. And so what happens is that I'm just talking to people, tons of people, as much as I can all the time, and then a project opens up, and I will usually at that point I'll have an idea of who I think might work. If it's not something that we can already handle, because the work expands and contracts, and sometimes people have bandwidth, sometimes it doesn't. We're often right on the razor's edge, and And then I basically am like looking at all the people that I've talked to over the last however long it's been, over the last like year or whatever, about who's going to fit this thing, right? And so then I start talking to them about that. So we start talking about that, and then we see kind of how that goes, and how do they respond to this, how do they respond to that. And I'm not going at it like I'm trying to test them necessarily, but by virtue of a discussion,
Mhm.
which is usually a wide ranging discussion, I will usually ask probing questions about how they would solve things, or what are they struggling with, or whatever, and I'm learning about them. And back to the okay, so that's kind of my process. And then eventually what happens is that I'm like, let's give this person a shot. We give them a little thing, here's a little bit of paid work. Great. Did that work out well? Okay, here's a little more, maybe a little more complex. Does that work? Great. Okay, here's here's the dump
Mhm.
truck, you know. But the one thing, there's a couple things I want to, that's context. And sorry it took a really long time. We can keep talking, by the way. I got a little more time. But with that context, the thing that is the most important is to me is how they stick out. And at this point, I would say, and again, one person's opinion, um, not taking risks is risky at this point. Take some risks, like stick out in some way, try something, and be yourself. You have to be authentic. This is what you learn over lots of discussions. The more we
Mhm.
talk, the more we get to know each other, the more I will likely find out who you really are, which is like what we both want. Because if I know who you really are, and I am saying you should work with us, we're both going to win, because I'm going, I know you, I think, and I think you're going to work out, because what we
Sure.
don't want at Team Audio, remember the chemistry thing? What we don't want is for someone to come in and like not fit and then cause a problem. It only takes one person to kind of like poison the well, or whatever. So to stick out, I think you have to take risks. There's a lot of people, a lot of talent. And again, it goes into that thing you said earlier where it's like, there's a lot of tools and it's easier than ever, and there's a lot of free stuff, and anyone can kind of start making some really great stuff if they've got talent and whatever. So what you find is a lot of talent. And so how do you stick out? You got to do something. You got to do something interesting. And so, if I go out and I see you know sometimes you need to see, sometimes if I got a Call of Duty project, I don't, but if I did, and I went and I saw a really strong Call of Duty demo that was very kind of playing it straight, like guns and explosions and hit effects and everything else, and it played it straight, but it was really good and not risky, that might actually be the choice. So this is not a blanket for everything, but the people that really stick out to me are the ones that have done something interesting that doesn't sound like everything else, that and that are making an impression on me with what I would probably just call like maturity. And that is basically the ability to kind of you know hear something you don't want to hear and learn from it and take it in stride. I always try to be respectful and professional, but it's like a lot of the times the honesty can hurt, but it's coming from a place of like, you need to hear this, which is this thing that you don't want to hear, and then you hear that and you see how they react to that. And so it's a mixture of like how they react to me, and how what they're showing me, and if it seems interesting, and if it seems like you can. Here's the thing: great sound designers of any experience level are ultimately just telling stories, and if they're being authentic and really making a choice that is coming from them, if they're in touch with themselves and their emotions, and they're expressing that through their work, it shines through. It is different than someone who is, let's say, nailed the technique, has a good library, knows what they're supposed to do. That's great. We need those people too. But like the ones that stick out to me are the ones where you can tell, like, here's someone who like is just expressing themselves, and
Mhm.
it's authentic, and I felt something. And I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I don't know. It's just, I mean, I do as much as anyone else. Like if I was applying to something, I would try to dig deep and do something expressive. There have been every time that I've done a demo, let's say personally, like when I was looking for jobs, let's say, that was really just hitting the points, that was very much on the nose, kind of just do the thing and make it sound cool. I've never gotten a job doing that. The jobs that I have gotten have been by being more expressive and taking some risks. So there's a bit of advice. If it doesn't work out, I'm sorry. you know, I take, write me and let me know that you did what I said and it didn't work, and then I'll maybe have to rethink it. But I think as of today, I would say the biggest risk you can take is not being risky, because there are just so many people out there now. There are always kind of have been, but there's so many people with so much talent and so much content and everything else that you have to do something different. So good luck. It's hard, but that's what it's about, I think.
No, totally. That's great. And you actually, that's a really cool insight into sort of your, I guess we'll call it test interview process.
It's a
And
process, yeah.
yeah, and there's been a lot of discourse on, I think art
I'm
tests in
listening.
general.
I'm
Oh, you're
listening.
fine. You're
Sorry.
fine.
I'm letting my dog out. Go ahead.
There's been a lot of really awesome discourse on kind of art tests, audio tests, the testing
Ha.
process, which I think has been really interesting just in terms of like, is
Yeah.
it disadvantageous to people who maybe don't have the resources but have the
It
passion and
is.
talent and things like that? I was just wondering if yes, but I was wondering if you had any insight or
Oh, you're
opinions
hitting
on that.
on. You're getting a lot. Yeah, these are some good questions, Ashton. All right. Tests. Oh boy. So here's the thing: is I understand them. I understand why I've given them. And people will vouch for this. Like even when I was working in house, I was always trying to think of different ways to approach tests, specifically to make them more indicative or telling, to get more out of them, because they are extremely disruptive, and also because I was looking for ways to maybe make them less disruptive. I hate tests. I'll just come out and say it. And I know that people maybe, I don't know, whatever. This is a contentious subject, but I hate them. I think they're the worst. I think they don't really tell you what you need to do. People in my team will disagree with me, and that's totally fine. I just can't stand them. I've taken so many of them, and I look back on them. I'm like, what a pain. What a pain. So what's the question is, what's the alternative, right? Because so let's say you have I think the thing is with tests is you have to be strategic, and you have to know what you're testing for, and you shouldn't just give a sound design test as part of your process. I think that's lazy. It's lazy, okay? Because it's also not empathetic. There's no empathy in just giving a test to give a test because you can. That's wrong. That's wrong. Don't do that. Everyone that's listening to this, please don't do that. That's not the answer. Dang.
Yeah,
Um,
wow.
the
Cruising.
wrecking ball comes in.
Yeah.
Um, but here's what I would say is that I do believe that there is a rational test, and that is to test a very specific thing when you have uh, candidates that you I guess for whatever reason you can't decide between. Do you see the problem though? It's like if I that's my job, right? If I can't decide. So here's the thing. The alternative to it is it could be equally you could punch holes through it as well. What I would say is this, and this is also another thing that no one wants to hear, and maybe this makes me a bad person, but is that I don't want to have to give a test because I already need to know who can do the job. And if you haven't convinced me you can do the job with the demo you've already prepared, and the resume that you've already sent, and the cover letter I've already read, and the discussions we've already had, then you shouldn't get the job. And I know that sucks. And also probably the number one thing, which again is a catch 22 and people hate to hear it, but it is true, is that what counts, I mean, equally as much, if not more than any of that, is who is telling me that I should hire you.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where it's the problem with that is that starts getting into really deep complex problems. So, you start getting into issues of, let's say, underrepresented groups, and why are they underrepresented, and why have I not heard about them, or whatever. And so we got to be cautious. Hiring is hard. It's the most important thing you do, hands down. Because what is a business without its people? It's nothing. It's a empty building. It's a it's an FPS level, or whatever. But it's like it's nothing. So testing should, in my opinion, be reserved for. Certainly, you don't blanket test. This is I just don't feel like that's right. I have a moral problem with that personally because I've done them. And for me, for example, if I got a test right now, guess what? I am taking that time is being taken away from my kids. Period. Because I work all day and then I got to do a test. You're taking time away from my kids. Even if I didn't have kids, you're taking precious time, right? So I would say when you give a test, it should be a very targeted thing. It should be to a very few, as few people as possible. It should be the last step, and you shouldn't do it. Let me propose a counter to a test: is a small piece of paid work.
Mm.
These big companies, it drives me crazy. And this is also, I probably shouldn't talk like this, but I'm gonna. It's like if you're a big huge company with money that can pay someone. Okay, a paid test is another story. A paid test is better because at least you're getting compensated.
Mm-hmm.
A free test is, I feel like, kind of taking advantage, and I feel like it would be better to say, how about this? How about we do a 2-week contract, 2 weeks, a 3-day contract. We want 3 days of work from you. We're going to pay you for 3 days of work. We're going to pay you something cheap, even, not minimum wage because it's just too technical for that. But let's say $15 an hour. I'm going to pay you $15 an hour for 3 days of work. You're going to get paid for it. And we're trying to see this one very specific thing that is making us uncertain. So for example, like a thing that we have tested for, not team audio. I don't know that we've given we have. So one thing that we have tested for is in the very beginning was speed. So we would say, here is a thing to do. And I hope we paid for them. I actually can't remember. I would today, which is like, we'd say, all right, here's a thing. Here's a video. Make the sounds for this. Show us what you got by tomorrow. And, pick a day. Pick a day. Tell us when you have a day. It can be a weekend. I don't care. Tell us when you have we're going to send you this at 9 a.m. We need to see it at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And by the way, we are not expecting the most amazing thing in the entire world. We want to see what you can do in a day. And so you get that back and then you say, all right, are you down to do a revision? If you're down to do a revision, we want to see what you get one more day, and then judge on that, and it's done. And it should be to like one person and be like, by the way, we're going to pay you for this. And if you do it, if you succeed, you got the job. Like this, there's just, I don't know. Sometimes maybe there's not a way around a test, but certainly you can pay for it. Certainly if you're an actual company that is making big games, you can pay for the test. Pay for the test. I don't know. That's just my opinion. And maybe it's naive, or maybe it's you know, uh, uh, you're not paying your dues enough or something. That's another thing I can't stand. But it's like, I just feel like there's a better way to do it, and as leaders, we need to really. These are pain points, and you're right. Like, what are you supposed to do? And this is see, when you say like, what does it do for people with less, right? People who have less. Well, yeah, exactly. That sucks. How do you solve that? I don't know. That's getting into like real problems, which are the problems that are up to leaders to solve. So we do talk about we actually had a very recent thread in the last few months, I think. Seems like it. In the Team Audio Slack about that, about tests. And there was some healthy debate. Because some people think like, well, screw it, you got to take a test, especially if tests are especially common. Unpaid spec work is especially common in music, and which
Oh,
I also
sure.
think is not good. I feel like if you can't tell what you're getting based on everything they've made so far, uh, then don't go with them, or talk to people. See if other people that you trust have maybe talked to them or worked with them and feel like that it's a safe enough bet. It's all risk mitigation, and I feel like at that point, maybe I'm in a spot of luxury where I can say the way that we do it is what I described. By the time I have a project and I'm going to look to someone to get someone in there, if I don't know who they are, I have not done my job, because at that point I've probably been talking to someone for months and I should know them well enough to know, like, you don't need to take a test. Here's some work, get it done. And by the way, in team audio, it's like if we were to find someone that we is risky and we give them a small chunk of work and it doesn't cut it, all that happens is we do it. And then we say, sorry, you don't get, sorry, this isn't going anywhere. But we're not going to, we will basically absorb that and get the assets that need to be done to the people. So that's kind of how we do it. But yeah, it's a great question. These are all really good questions.
In terms of pain points too, if we're kind of on that subject too, what are your thoughts about crunch in the industry? Because I know that's a major, major pain point, especially in AAA development.
Yeah. Well, it's hard for me to not be hypocritical because I have crunched. When I was working in-house, I was the walking anti-crunch. In fact, when I was at Volition, this is a long time ago, when I was offered the studio audio director position, my boss, who was amazing, I love him. His name was Dan Cermak. I went to him and I said, okay, on condition, because I actually, the reason they gave it to me, or they offered it to me, was because I had another job offer. So they were like, all right, we're going to counter with this. Do you want to be studio audio director? And I said, well, I want to know that we don't have to crunch. I don't want to crunch anymore. And it just gotten to that point. And he said, well, that's your job to solve. And I said, will you actually let me solve it? And he said, yep, it's your job to solve. Figure out crunch for your team. And I was like, okay. And we kind of did. The challenge is this: crunch is extremely complicated. It's not just something that just happens. It is something that is a result of many things. And often you can even put in policies. Like, so for example, one thing I did is I said at that time is I said no one can work Sundays, because what happens is that if you work Monday through Sunday, you're not working 7 days. You're working 7 plus 5. You're working 12 days, because you can't, unless you're planning on taking time off the next week. And then if you work that weekend, you're working, it's crazy. It's too much, right? And so it's another thing I have kind of a moral challenge with, which is taking too much of people. And so I put that in place, right? And I said, this is one of the few kind of mandates that I had as like a supervisor, was I was like, no, 1 day off a week. I don't care what it is. You take 1 day off, because we need you functioning through the work week. You know what I mean? And you can't do that if you work every single day. So what happened was, we're at now fast forward, right, to the very end of the project, and we'd done it. We had made sure that at least 1 day was taken off. Now, the question is, did people work those 8 hours in the rest of the week? Some of them probably. Did they get the day off? Yes. So, but then what happened is, you're in the, I will never forget this. And if they ever see this, they're going to laugh at me. In the last week of the project, and I mean, it was hot and heavy at that point, let me tell you. It was the very end, and everyone was crunching. And I'm on, it's Sunday, and I remember it clearly. I was axe shopping, because I was trying to find an axe to cut out a stump. So I'm axe shopping, and I get a call, and it's a guy on the team who was basically representing the entire team, saying, Ariel, it's Sunday. We want to work. It is the last possible chance for us to make these changes. Please let us work this Sunday. And I remember it because I responded and I said, I'm axe shopping right now. Do you really want to be asking me this while I'm axe shopping? It was a joke. But they said, they're like, please, and they begged me. It's crazy. So this is the thing. It's like, people want to. And sometimes your job as a leader is to protect people from themselves. By the way, I caved and I said, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. It's the last week of the project. Get in there, do your thing. I hope you're happy. And then I ended up going in and whatever, because I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have them all working on the one Sunday in this entire project, and I'm not there. So I had to go in. I had to, morally. But I will say this is that it is a two-way street, crunch, and people may find this also unpleasant to hear. But so one of the things I did when I was at Volition trying to solve crunch is I went to this one programmer who's a principal programmer, sharp guy, pleasant guy, never crunched, and people loved him. It didn't matter. Like he was one of those people who, even though he worked 9 to 5. No one resented him, even in the middle of a crunch. And so I actually booked a meeting with him, and I said, how did you do it? How do you do it? And he said, simply, you stop crunching. He said, you stop. He's like, but you can't just stop and not get your work done. He's like, it's a whole series of things. And I followed his guidance. I did. This is how I did it. I don't do it anymore because I got my excuses. All right. But let's just say that what he said was, you have to stop crunching. You have to force yourself to 40 hours a week. You have to be way more honest about how much you can get done. You have to be extremely focused while you're at work. So you can't be having chats. You can't be going and doing this. You can't be walking around, blah, blah, blah. Like you got to basically do your job, for that 8 hours has to count. And you got to tune a bunch of stuff out and stay focused. And then when people ask, you have to say no a lot more. And I was like, okay, so like you have to be able to say no, that can't get done, which means in game dev which is very hard. It's maybe, it might be easier for a programmer to have that kind of leverage, but as an audio person, you basically end up saying like, no, we can't do this awesome feature because the audio team does not. You can do it if you don't need audio. Like, oh, you want to add this awesome new animation that I think is amazing and I would love as a player? No, because it needs sound. Figure out a way to do it that doesn't need sound. You're golden. But if you do something that needs sound, you're not getting the sound because we are already overburdened, or whatever. And you point at the graphs and whatever. And so I don't know if I'm really answering your question. I'm against crunch, of course. Like it's not good. It's not healthy. I generally go by the guideline for myself of 2 weeks of crunch. Anything beyond that is diminishing returns. So I would say if I put in 2 60-hour weeks, I gotta take a break. I gotta have, and plus I'm kind of old, 40. So it's like I can't do that as much anymore. Okay, like I can't. I'm a wimp when it comes to like that kind of thing. So it's like if I do a 2 60-hour weeks, I'm probably gonna need to work less the next week. Like I'm gonna need to work a 30-hour week or two. You know what I mean? I say that, but then I crunch. So I'm, it's really hard. My excuse, which is a falsehood, I admit, is that it's like what Elon Musk said. You don't change the world in 40 hours a week or something like that. It's like you don't really start your own business and succeed without putting in extra time. It sucks. It totally sucks. But I have. But the other thing is I also would really encourage people to find some kernel inside them that is an unbreakable kernel of 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 a principle of something. So to me, it is I'm going to eat dinner with my family at the absolute minimum. That is the unshatterable kernel. Have I missed that? I mean, like literally, like I can count 5 times in the last 2.5 years. So my family's cool with that. They understand. They support me. They want this to work. So, but like have something where it's like at the absolute minimum, I'm going to take this piece and it's always for me or my family or whatever it is, and don't budge. Is 99% of the times don't budge on it. Like that's the thing that you hold sacred, and that will help. And then you kind of expand that. Now it's like, well, okay, I'm going to have family and bath time, and I'm going to watch a movie with my wife or watch a show with my wife every night. And then but then maybe after that, I might go back and put in a little extra. But you got to have something. Otherwise, it will consume you. And the only thing I can say is what Eric Barker, who I love, had a great fortune of working with Eric Barker at Volition for a little bit. You should Google him; he's amazing. The way he puts it is eulogy values. I don't know that he came up with that, but I feel like that hits it on the head. Every now and then, you got to fast forward to your deathbed and you got to pretend you're looking back on your life and you got to ask yourself, how much does it matter that you shipped that project? How much does it matter that you spent time with your loved ones? And, there you go. Whatever your answer to that is what you should do. Because at some point we're all going to face that. And no one says on their deathbed, I shipped Saints Row, or whatever. And so it's
Yeah.
like, what they might say is I spent time with my kids, so you got to ask yourself those questions. Otherwise your life gets all out of balance and everything can go sour.
No, that's awesome.
Not to
And
just like
oh,
go not to just like pull out of anywhere, but do you have any other like key lessons that you've learned over the course of your game dev career that you would like to share?
I think, yeah, sure. All right, I'll give you a couple. So first thing I'll give you is for students or people just getting their start, which is have a plan. This is something that I feel like I fall short here too, of course, but it's so incredibly important to what I recommend is putting pen to paper. I know it's old school, but this will help, and it can be hard when you're looking at a blank page, but at the absolute minimum, and have a fantasy about it. Doesn't matter. You don't have to. You could crumple it up and throw it away. I wouldn't recommend it, but this is for you to do, for your eyes only, if you want it to be that way. Write down where you are today and be honest. Write down where you want to be in some amount of time. Call it a year. Start at a year. Where do I want to be in a year? And put 2 points. Make a timeline. Over here, I'm trying to do it with the. Over here, you would say I'm a student, right? Over here, you say I'm an associate sound designer. Whatever it is, have at it, right? This is your paper, and put 4 lines in the middle of it and say, how do I get from here to here? And if you don't know, that's okay. Try. Just try. Make a plan, because if you don't have a plan, the plan is going to have you. I don't know how that doesn't really make sense. If you don't have a strategy for yourself, then the rest of the world's going to have a strategy for you, and you might find yourself 5 years from now going, what happened? How did I end up here? This is not what I meant to do. And look, we're all allowed to have the lives we want. It's harder for some than others. There's a million factors, but I find that step one of kind of anything is having some kind of plan for yourself. And if you aren't taking the time, it could take you 10 minutes, or it could take a night at it. Spend some time is even better. Think about all the things you could do between now and then, and give yourself some time, a year, 2 years, whatever. Think about all the things. Maybe it's not a linear thing, right? Maybe it's I am this today at the top. I'm this in a couple years at the bottom, and just all the different things you could do that you think would push you in that direction, push you towards that goal. And at the absolute minimum, do that. At the absolute minimum. And you know what? I get it. When I was young, or now even, it's like I don't know what I want to be. I don't know what I want to do. Maybe you don't even know. Pick something. Say I want to be a technical sound designer. Say I want to be a composer. Whatever it is. And what I would also recommend is, don't just limit it to a title. Close your eyes and imagine what it looks like. What are you doing? Where are you? What are you doing? Are you in a building? Are you in front of a monitor? Are you talking to someone? Are you in a meeting? Are you meeting with someone? Like, what are you doing? Write that down too. And then just write all the things that you think are, to you, seem like logical steps that will increase the odds of that, right? That'll just increase the odds. Not going to seal the deal, but get you closer. That's the minimum. The next best thing I think to do, if you can, is find someone who's doing it that is willing to look it over and help you cross some of those off. Be like, don't do this, don't do that. No, 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 just do this, this, and this. Because then you're like, well, but by the way, like cross it off, but keep your first draft. No one knows. No one knows anything. This is the other thing that we have audience. It's one of our core principles, actually, is how we talk to each other. One of our core tenets is uncertainty. No one knows. I don't know. Honesty is another one, in fact. But when I'm talking to Team Audio, someone will be like, "How do we get new clients?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know. I'm just trying. We try. We try stuff. We fail. We succeed. We middle of the road things. I don't know. You just got to try stuff and see. It's like science. Just try, change, try, change, try. But take if you have a mentor or someone that you can reach out to me if you want, they can look at your list and say, these are less likely, these are more likely. Take that as a data point and then make your decision about your life, make some choices. So that's one lesson I would try to impart to anyone who is doing anything really, that is very helpful, has been helpful to me. Every time I do it, it's helpful. Clears your mind a little too. You sleep better at night. You write it down. Okay, it's written down now. You don't have to think about it. It's on the paper. It's not in your head. It's there. And then the other thing I would say is, specifically for sound people, is don't forget what we're doing. Okay, it's really easy to get wrapped up in technology. We talked a little about that. It's also really easy to get wrapped up in what of it. Like, what game do I want to work on? What company do I want to work for? What am I doing? What? It's really easy to do that, but you gotta bring it back to kind of, I don't know if I'd say necessarily why, but yeah, kind of a why what sort of thing. What we do and why we do it. At the end of the day, we're telling stories and making people feel stuff. Like, it did this experiment at Volition and it drove them crazy and they all thought it was crazy. But I was like, why are you here? Like, I went to everyone on the audio team and I said, why are you here? Why here? Why are you doing this? And it's like, I had to be like a kid, and just keep asking why. No, that's not that, because usually the response to that is like, well, um, we are we are making rad sounds that enhance the visuals, or something. And then you're like, that's what you do. Why? And what it really came down to at the end of the day, what we came to consensus was doing something that ideally is enjoyable, but at the minimum doesn't suck, and getting paid for it. Right? So that's why you do this. You take either of those away and you're very likely to not do it anymore. And then you go, all right, well, then what is the job? Right? The job is is to is to, it's to make someone feel something that you felt. It's like you want them to feel something. Audio is about so much about feelings. There's a piece of it might be communicating information, a piece of it might be, but really at the end of the day, we're telling a story and we're trying to make you feel something that, and you can't make anyone feel anything, but you can create an environment that is conducive to those feelings, that is going to make it more likely for them to feel the thing that the story is trying to tell. If like you play a game, and I would argue even games without stories, it's the same thing. You're telling a story. You're creating an experience that is telling them something, and you want them to feel something. And go back to that as much as you need to. Go, what am I trying to do? What story am I trying to tell here? My boss right now on the project that I'm working on is one of the greatest. He probably, I don't think he'll ever watch this, but he's been one of the best mentors I've had in my career, actually. And he always asks that question: what story are you trying to tell? And if the more I go back to that, we get so caught up in tech. We're like, what's the next cool thing for spatialization in VR? And it's like, okay, but what have we really nailed the storytelling? Because I can watch a commercial and I'll tear up. I never feel that in game. I can watch a commercial. You know what I mean? Like, I will watch a commercial and I will feel something, and I'm like, damn it, I don't want to. I don't want to feel something on a commercial, but I did. Dang it, they got me right. But I almost never feel that. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just a hard thug or something. I don't think I am. But like, maybe I'm just this cold-blooded guy. But it's so rare. I'll put it that way. It's so rare that I play games and I'm like, oh, I felt something there. Whatever it was, some real feeling. Most of the time, I'm just kind of like, I'm just trying. I'm trying to mechanically do this thing, but the storytelling isn't there, and that's audio is so important for that. So I would say, the way to do that, the best sound designers I know, it's just me again, but the best sound designers I know, are really in touch with their emotions. They're able to articulate their emotions. They are um, when an emotional thing happens to them, it is impactful, and they're not shelling themselves off from that sort of thing. Like, they feel stuff. The other thing too is they they bring their so imagine this. Imagine a sound designer who is out living their lives, playing games, watching movies, going on trips, going and reading, doing whatever they do, just living life, right? And they're feeling their lives, right? So if I take my kids on a hike and I feel something, right? I feel that. Or like if I have a problem with someone or I have a problem with something, I feel that, you know, and you feel these things, then you bring that to your work and express it through the story. Like those are the best sound designers, because even if how are you supposed to make someone feel tragedy if you've never felt tragedy or allowed yourself to? How are you supposed to express, longing if you can't pull from that feeling of longing and express it in the story that you're trying to tell? This is why I think like the best sound design, I mean, you could be playing a game and you'll feel that thing and you're like, how did they do that? Well, they felt it. They have felt it, and they are able to take that and now express it. And then now you feel it. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think a lot of sound designers are not on that path. They are on a different path. They're on I don't know, something else. But if you look, I remember this one time, and then I'll shut up because it's actually I probably should maybe we should tie this thing up. I don't know. It's been a while, but and I talked a lot. But I will say this: I was in a room once with a producer who came from business, didn't come from creative, came from business, and he was kind of let's say making fun of um, artists who were talking about feelings. You know what I mean? So like they were saying like, I don't know, he had witnessed a critique or something like that, and the artist was saying like, well, it doesn't make me feel the way it's supposed to feel is kind of like this, like I want them to feel this. And he said he started kind of poking fun, well, not in a horribly malicious way, but kind of maybe in an ignorant way, basically saying like, oh, the artists, they're saying they feel it, feels. And I had to stop him and I was like, look, that is their business language. Like when you say return on investment, okay, like we say feelings, like that is the expression of what we do. And so don't it, as a creative person, you know, consume as much as you need to of history and people in your field and books and articles and watch videos and all that stuff, whatever you need to do to sort of understand that piece of what is the actual essential piece of what we do, which is it's all feelings based. And if you're the kind of person who um, hasn't gotten in touch with your feelings and therefore are not able to express your feelings through your work, then stop what you're doing and start there. Figure it out. I can't tell you how. That is such a personal thing, but you have to try to figure that out. You need to feel stuff. Allow yourself to feel things. Ask yourself why you felt it. Ask yourself how you might. I mean, an easy way to do it is watch movies that make you feel something, then watch it again with a more critical eye and be like, that's the part where I felt something. Why did I feel that way? Listen, what's happening there? Like, what if I'm listening to this segment that makes me feel something? What audio is happening there? And take a note, take a hint from that. Be like, okay, that's a technique, or like, what did they do, and why does it work on me, and why does it work on me? Is it because I had this thing happen to me when I was young, or whatever it is? Sounds a little shrinky or whatever, but like that's kind of what you got to do in order to do that, and that's all good. That's all good stuff to do. And I shouldn't say shrinky. I just mean it's like it sounds very sitting on a couch. It's what you picture. It's like a visit to your psychiatrist or something. But it's that, yeah, that's kind of what you need to do. You need to kind of self-analyze, allow yourself to go deep and find out what made you feel that thing, and then when the opportunity presents itself, use that to express something that will make someone else feel that, if that's the goal of the story. So, all right, I don't know. That's
No,
how's
that's
that?
great. That is a perfect note to end on. We hit all the interview highlights. We talked about employment. We talked about technology, even though we said we never do that. We waxed poetic about the industry at large. Knocked it out of the park. That was great.
Okay, right on. You know what? I really appreciate it. I'm sorry it took a couple tries here, but
No, totally fine.
if there's ever another time you want to do this again, just let me know. And to anyone that watches this, whether it's at SCAD or you guys or or you know, on YouTube or whatever, get in touch. I'm happy to talk. It might take me a really long time. Ashton will vouch for me on that, but
No.
but look, it happened, right? So
Yeah.
so
That's great. No.
it always happens. I'm happy to keep talking to people, and if you want to do this again sometime, I'm down.
Thank you so much, Ariel. I hope you have a
My
really
pleasure.
great
Thank
day,
you.
okay?
Thanks. You guys too.
All right, see ya.
See ya.
See ya.